Jeff, is Apple really as far behind on artificial intelligence as the tech media would have us believe?
I think they might be in terms of actual finished products, but I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation. Let's take a closer look at what's going on with Apple and AI coming off of its Worldwide Developer Conference just a couple of weeks ago. I'm Jason Hall. He's Jeff Santoro. This is Investing Unscripted. This video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for even more great stock ideas, we have a special link. It's fool.com/unscripted. That's our special link. If you go to that link, fool.com/unscripted, you can get access to the Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now. Okay, so let's start with this. The overarching idea with Apple when it comes to AI is if you think about the way Apple has structured its business and its products, one of the things that it's prioritized is security and the other one is privacy. As a result, it's built this great business model that has become very compelling to lots of people that appreciate those things and also get pulled into the ecosystem and buy the company that makes almost all of the margin on phones, and now the growing revenue that they get from services, the cut they get from everything that's sold through the App Store, Apple Health, Apple TV Plus. The list goes on and on about the things that they've built around the ecosystem. But part of the argument, and Ben Thompson, I think, really of Stratechery really laid out the case better than anybody else. The entire business model that they've built runs counter to what has allowed other companies, Alphabet, Meta platforms, just as a couple, to leverage the massive amount of information that they have from people that use their products and services to train their AI.
Yeah. And I think data is a big part of the story here. And I think Apple has a ton of it. What I think is more interesting about Apple and its AI innovations, or lack thereof maybe, is the thing everyone always says about Apple is they're never the first to a technology, but they're usually the best once they get there, or at least that's what maybe the bulls would say about them.
Right.
And
never first to market, always best to market.
yeah. And I've also heard people say that as a pejorative, right? I've heard people who own Samsung smartphones, for example, kind of scoff when Apple touts a new feature on their phone and say something snide like, well, we've had that 2 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And actually, I think that's a bull case for Apple. The fact that they don't feel they need to be first to these technologies to be a dominant player in this space. I mean, I know worldwide Samsung sells more handsets, but Apple's the leader in the US. And that has allowed them, I think they're over 2 billion in their install base. Their ecosystem drives services revenue to the point where that's the fastest growing part of the business. So I think the story here, though, Jason, and I think this is where every investor needs to kind of figure this out for themselves, is are they going to be best to market when they get there with AI? I don't know, but I know that if they can nail it, I actually think this could drive a huge iPhone upgrade cycle.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And I think part of the story too, in terms of the never first to market, typically best to market, it goes back to before the iPhone. We could talk about the iPod, for example. The iPod, the secret there were lots of great music players, MP3 players that existed before the iPod did. The innovation with the iPod was the Apple Music Store, right? The ability to buy single songs, kind of saved the music industry. And then the willingness to come out with the iPhone, which was probably going to disrupt the iPod, which was by far the company's most important, profitable product at the time, where tons of smartphones were around. This is the one that became massively mainstream and was the kind of the connective tissue between people's personal lives and the enterprise and business lives. We saw those worlds meld, and then so many other features were added to it. The whole point, I think, is the pejorative part of well, I've had that on my Samsung for 2 years, is there was nothing that was disruptive and everything was just moderate improvement along the way. And Apple had so many other things that people preferred that kept them in the ecosystem. But what we're seeing now with AI is that maybe there could be some risk that the loyalty of users starts to peel away, depending on what their AI products actually look like. The first piece of evidence that gets presented is Siri. When Siri was first added to the iPhone, it felt revolutionary.
And then everyone started using it and realized it was anything other than revolutionary.
And there's an argument, and it's false because a lot of it's perception. There's an argument that it's no better now than it was. And it's much, much better.
Yeah.
But our expectations are also much higher because there are so many other voice assistants that work great and do more things that other platforms have.
I think, so when they announced all the AI stuff, I think it was last year at WWDC, and they had the big announcement of Apple Intelligence. And I watched the video and I thought to myself, I'm going to wait and see if this stuff actually is as cool as it looks, because
Yeah.
I'm smart enough to know that Apple is very good at selling and they have presentations that make everything seem revolutionary. It's hard not to watch an Apple video and be like, wow, this is the best thing in the world. But if they can actually nail this, if they can make user-friendly and actually helpful shortcuts on the device where it knows what I mean when I misspeak and Siri becomes actually super helpful and as intuitive and helpful as maybe typing into one of the large language models that we all use now, like ChatGPT, if they can actually nail it and make it useful, something that I'm going to use every single day as I navigate the device, I would upgrade for that. I would. And I'm one of those people who tries to hold on to my iPhone as long as I can. And that was the big news when that came out. Everyone, I think the bulls were saying, this is going to drive an upgrade cycle. They said you have to have the 15 or higher to get these technologies. And I still think that could happen. It just might be next year's phone or the year after that's phone, depending on when all these features roll out and if they bring the goods.
I think it's inarguable that the whole rollout of Apple Intelligence and Built for AI, their massive marketing campaign, set a far higher expectation for what Apple was going to be able to deliver. There are still features that were shown in ads that have not made it to the phones. It's clear that the company is definitely behind, I think, in a lot of ways. But I think you could also say that it's certainly struggling to deliver at the rate that management promised and the company marketed that it would be able to deliver. And the other part of it, we've seen certainly in the growth rates of the business. This is over the past 10 years. Revenue growth is about 80%. Free cash flow has grown at a lower rate. This is 10 years. Mid-single digit revenue growth rate over that period. We got a pandemic boost. And then if we look over the past few years, revenue growth has flatlined. Free cash flow has actually fallen. And if we look at it on a per share basis, it looks a little bit better just because
they repurchase a lot.
Share repurchases, right? So free cash flow per share is roughly flat, even though it's declined on a whole number basis. So as much as that revenue growth is happening in the services part of the business, it's certainly become a very stagnant business here more recently, and it's really failed to deliver on the expectations for AI, if not yet really fully on the reality of what it can be. Okay, we've said all that. WWDC happened June 9th through the 13th. Do you have any takes from WWDC that you want to apply to the business?
They did what they normally do. They upgraded the operating system, and there was all this talk about liquid glass, and fine. I'm an iPhone user. I love when I get the new operating system each year. It makes me feel like I have a new shiny phone when I don't. I think that was par for the course. Absent from the announcement was more info about AI, which is what we're talking about. But one of the things I'm wondering as I think about this business, both as a consumer and also as an investor, is what if Apple's just entering a new phase? What if it's okay that they just are a slower growing business that still adds value to the bottom line and generates cash forever? And maybe it's okay that you buy an iPhone every 5 or 6 or 7 years instead of every 2 years like you used to. But you're in that ecosystem. You're paying for cloud storage. You're paying for Apple Arcade. You're paying for Apple Music. Every 5 or 6 or 7 years, you're upgrading your home computer. Maybe when your iPad dies, you buy a new one. And that's just how this business goes on. We are in this mental model of they have to come out with the new thing. They were the revolutionary device with the iPhone. Then they were the revolutionary device with the iPad. Then they were the revolutionary device with the Apple Watch. And I think they could be the one that really nails AI on the device. And that could be their next quote unquote big thing. The only reason I think that matters though, is because the stock trades at 30 times trailing earnings. So, what I just laid out in terms of a possible future for this company where they're just a slower growing, super profitable, cash generating company is fine. Probably not for that multiple.
Yeah, I think that really nails it. So as much as the expectation, the company's certainly fallen short with artificial intelligence so far. But if you remember back, you go back in time, the iPad was not a massive success when it was first launched. The iPad mini, the iPhone S, I can't even remember it was the ones that were all the different like pastel colors. It was also not a success. What have they been successful with? Like a big innovation that wasn't innovation, the bigger iPhone, that was hugely successful. Finding things that people will pay more for, not catering to things that people will pay less for. That's been a big part of Apple's formula. I think what it also says is that Apple maybe is less concerned about finding early adopters with AI and doing what it's always done and making sure when it does put features on its phones and its tablets and its devices, that it works exceptionally well and it makes the user experience better. I don't think there's a long-time Samsung phone user that can't say that there haven't been plenty of features that showed up on the phone that weren't buggy. So that's a big difference in the design process. 30 times earnings is way too much to pay for a company that's not growing free cash flow per share, particularly when there's questions about catalysts for future growth. The last thing I'll throw out there, this is the one thing that's sitting in the back of my head. Johnny Ive spent a lot of years designing Apple's most successful products. He just sold his company to OpenAI for many billions of dollars. So maybe there is a future that's a little less Apple-centric when it comes to smart devices.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably another video, but I'll believe it when I see it.